Welcome to DrJLT Economics. I'm Dr. DrJLT. In today's episode, I want to talk about deflation, why its risks are mostly imaginary, and how it has been used as a boogeyman to justify more money printing and inflation. I want to cover this in three sections. First, I want to talk about the general symptoms and conditions of deflation. Secondly, I want to talk about why a lot of central banks say that they are afraid of deflation. And thirdly, I want to discuss what I believe are the wrong lessons learned from the Great Depression. So first things first. Deflation is basically a decrease in prices and an increase in the purchasing power of a single unit of certain currency. It can be resulted from an increase in productivity or a fall in demand. Not necessarily always a fall in demand, as a lot of the economists want to focus on today. In fact, historically, it has been recorded that it had been caused by both, and so this basically is to ignore one and focus only on the other is somewhat dishonest. But this, I would say, is no longer a real threat. Because historically, when currencies were backed by either gold or silver, or in fact, when people directly used silver as currencies, the problem frequently was that in times of deflation, it was not possible to shrink the total money in circulation. And this could lead to a condition whereby people's willingness to consume actually comes down as a result of deflation, because they believe that their money will have more purchasing power tomorrow than it is today. And as a result, this actually feeds back to deflation and causes more problems in a positive feedback loop. But I also think this was just part of the business cycle, right? This had always caused some businesses to fail, but at the same time, it had always resulted in a reallocation of resources such that coming out of a deflationary event, businesses became stronger. The purchasing power of the currencies were not destroyed, and the society becomes more prosperous afterwards. Now, in today's fiat-based monetary system, a lot of focus, because people have been focusing more on the demand side, as a cause of deflation, people are quite afraid of two things. One is the velocity of money coming down, and the second is a tightening of monetary policy. When these things happen, either intentionally or unintentionally, this would indeed also cause a deflation, and this will have similar effects as it has been historically. But because in the fiat-based car system, especially ever since the gold standard has been abandoned, there has been so much spending, so much borrowing, and so much more debt. Central banks are quite afraid of the effect of deflation. And this leads us to the second section, which is why banks are so afraid. At least they say that they are so afraid of deflation. And the reason is simple. If you have a lot of debt in the economy, whether it's a national debt or corporate debt or private debt. When you have these debts, and when the purchasing power of your of your currency increases, right? Then there's a decrease in price. The assumption, and usually it is true, is that companies or private citizens or even governments are going to collect less income, and so their debt burden is going to go up, and this will because they have so much debt and now they have less income, they may become insolvent, and this will lead to bankruptcies and a lot of insolvencies, which will reduce the demand and which will further result in a decrease in price, and this will create a circle, which was that a deflation plus, because there's now it is now combined with debt and a lot of insolvencies and bankruptcies. We also have stagnation. So stagnation combined with deflation, and this is what has been argued by, at least now, Bernanke and a lot of, I think, the mainstream, not necessarily mainstream, but a lot of the ones who are popular with the government, economists. They argue that this is what was happening during the Great Depression. Well, the Great Depression indeed started as a deflationary event. It was mostly government intervention, that the wrong kind at first, that prolonged the depression, aggravated the situation. At the time, the government basically didn't allow companies to reduce their labor costs. They did not want to become unpopular with their electorate. And in a deflationary situation, when you didn't allow the companies to reduce their the salaries of their employees, what happened was that some companies decided that they need to lay off some of their employees because they did not want to have too much cost in such a bad economic environment. And this led to increase in unemployment. And when unemployment went up, the demand really dropped. And as demand really dropped, then the situation basically worsened still. So it started as a deflation aggravated by debt, and then it was also aggravated by unemployment. And at that point, it basically become a stronger feedback loop. And it was not until the government decided in the United States to intervene in the correct way, which was to directly employ a lot of people and thereby reduce unemployment, that they slowly came out of it. And of course, World War II really helped the United States in its situation, because it really completely changed the economy. It provided an argument for the economy for resources to be reallocated without for the politicians to become unpopular, and the demand really rose sharply. And as a result, we came out of the Great Depression. But the wrong lesson I think learned was that the stagnation that happened following the deflation was a result of not enough money printing. Because in World War II, indeed they spent the United States went to debt and borrowed money, and it was also true that they borrowed money and employed unemployed people. So the lesson that has been learned by a lot of central bankers, especially those in the United States, is that to combat, to prevent a similar scenario, the best way is to print money. It was to keep on printing money. But I would say that, how about not allowing the economy to adapt by itself without too much intervention? How about at that time, if you, number one, allowed the salary, the labor costs to come down as the economy dictated, but at the same time you tightened your monetary policy, and this would actually also lead to a scenario that's basically it will force government companies to reorganize, but because the factories, because all the production lines were still there, because all the skilled workers were still there, after reconfiguration and reallocation, there was a good chance that this would have also would have also exited the Great Depression too, right? Of course, these are all hypotheses. I'm not saying that what I suggest here is necessarily going to be was necessarily the right thing to do, but at the same time, none of the central bankers can say with certainty that what they are doing here, printing a lot of money at that point, was going to actually help. And but at the same time, one thing that I think is more insidious is printing a lot of money and still have stagnation, and there is no way to come out of it. And this is exactly what has happened in Japan since 3 decades. In fact, for the last 3 decades, Japan entered in the beginning into a deflation, and they decided that they needed to do quantitative easing, which was to print a lot of money. And an effect of this was that they did indeed prevent a lot of companies from going bankrupt. They basically defaulted by inflation, not by bankruptcy. But at the same time, all the same companies that had become inefficient was still there. They take up all those spaces of business, of employment, of the labor market, and they make it impossible for new, more efficient companies to rise up. And this is this, of course, is a control over deflation, because deflation for deflation to come into the picture, you not only have to look at demand, but also there is a area which is productivity. And over time, Japan became inefficient compared to its international competitors as a result of all this quantitative easing. And as a result, they had deflation indeed under control, but they were unable to have control over stagnation. They cannot control stagnation because for us to come out of stagnation, for an economy to come out of stagnation, you need to have better, higher productivity combined with increased demand. But if you only have a lot of artificial demand that is propped up by money printing, but a decrease in productivity, what you have is a combination of inflation and stagnation. Now, of course, in the same amount of time, in the same time period, there were loose monetary policies across the world, so there was not a huge, and at the same time also there was indeed a decrease in population in Japan. So there was indeed also a net fall in demand. So you print some money to create artificial demand, but at the same time, you have an aging population, so you have a shrinking population, and also as people get older, they spend a bit less. So an aging population altogether, this created a situation where they did not see a lot of inflation. But this will not be the case for the United States and for many other countries. For the United States in particular, this will possibly, very likely in my judgment, lead to inflation combined with stagnation. And this stagnation will not be caused by a fall in demand, but really a fall in productivity, because all the zombie companies, all the companies that can only live on debt but cannot actually be turned around and become profitable again, they occupy the space, making it much harder for new companies, more efficient companies to come up, and this will cause a stagnation. And one last thing I want to add before we go is that as you continue to do this type of quantitative easing, what happens is that the entire economy becomes so much burdened by debt that you necessarily have to be afraid of deflation, because you expose yourself and your companies to the situation where even if you just increase the interest rate a little bit, or even if you tightening the monetary policy a little bit, or if if you slow down the printing of money a little bit, and which is why they have been accelerating, what happens is that the velocity of money also comes down. So this would actually create a situation where they say that they wanted to prevent in the first place, which was that deflation, which was that a lot of companies, because they have become so indebted, they are not allowed to reconfigure, to go bankrupt or to reconfigure. You do not allow the economic resources to be reallocated. You just basically made the economy so inefficient that you are now exposed to higher risks of deflation. So you have to keep on printing. But I would argue that deflation, not deflation, is not the key issue. That is not the most dangerous thing. I think deflation will only lead to reallocation of resources and then a rejuvenation of the economy. I think what was more insidious was stagnation. And as they keep on printing the money, they will have inflation and stagnation. And this is going to lead to the destruction of the US dollar, which I would personally consider to be a good thing. But I don't know why they keep on doing it. I think perhaps it is too much, it's just basically too profitable to do it otherwise for themselves, for the short term. As long as they can keep this thing going, they want to keep it. Or maybe because they are so afraid of the consequences that they have to, once they are on this track, it is impossible to come down.